Okay, so we are live. Hi, Reba. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tiana. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So I just wanted to first hop on here and say thanks for coming here today to the Environmental Answers podcast. The mission is to bring clarity on. I realize right now that like I had it open on YouTube at the same time. So I was hearing myself delayed. So anyway, if you saw awkward pauses, it's because I was like, why am I hearing myself? Okay. Anyway, restart. The funds of being going like I guess going live. But main point of what I was trying to say is Environmental Answers is here to bring clarity on what's what. We're bringing different environmental leaders to come on and basically tell us about their career, their journey thus far, and what they see as the critical trends within the environmental industry to help us to continue to move forward. Today, I have Reba Elliot, and I just want to give her an opportunity to first tell us a little bit about her personal journey, bringing her into this space of environmental leadership.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tiana. And just to say again, yeah, really, really grateful to be here and to be able to talk with you and for all the work that EnvAns is doing and all the work that you're doing personally. It's just such an honor and a pleasure and a joy to like hang out with somebody who's so fun and like goofy and to talk about things we both care about. I really
Exactly.
appreciate it. So my journey. I grew up in Virginia. The place I grew up was single family homes and paved roads, so it wasn't like super, super country. But we had behind all the houses was woods. And in the back of the woods was a creek and then a river. And I spent a lot of time in those woods when I was little. And my brother and my sister and all of the kids in the neighborhood, we basically just hung out in the woods and by the river like most of the time. Um, when I got older, my first real job was that I started a nonprofit that was to give critical thinking skills to underserved young people in DC. I worked with kids from age 2 in shelter for survivors of domestic violence and their children, all the way up to young people who were about to leave the criminal justice system. And I loved that work. I loved the idea of, I've benefited from parents who went to college, and my mom taught me to read when I was young, and I went to good schools. And the idea of transferring some of those benefits to people who were in really difficult situations because they were on the other side of the coin that I was on, that idea, like, I really loved that. And I love the people that I work with. Um, but at one point, my husband, his job was going to move him to Nigeria. So I had to leave that organization that I had founded and that I had dedicated every waking moment to. Um, and we ended up not moving, which made me like really mad, kind of in a way. But I found myself with all of this time on my hands. The thing that I had been doing every moment of every day, I was no longer doing. And I asked myself, what did I really, really care about? And the answer that came back to me was those times in the woods and that sense of connection to nature. And I knew that there was a crisis on our planet, but I didn't know much about it. But I decided that since I had all this time, I could learn a little bit more. So at that time, I there wasn't so much like you could read stuff online, but it wasn't like a very good like format. So I established a deal with the printer in my town that he would print for me 1 penny per page. And I downloaded the IPCC report from that year. I got very, very familiar with the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, every single piece, social sciences, all kinds of like, how do you convince people to take action on the environment? I read probably thousands of pages worth in that year. And then I applied to be a secretary in a nonprofit that was working on climate change. It happened to be a faith-based nonprofit. And I discovered that this tiny little realm of faith-based work on climate and nature is where I feel really, really most at home. So it was not an intentional path. It was nothing that I sort of set out and like all, I know you and so many other people are like, I really want to do this. I fell into it by accident. And I'm very, very happy for that accident.
Well, I love happy accidents.
Yeah.
Something that's interesting, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Reba. I wanted at one point to go to school for engineering. So before I was trying to decide, am I gonna go for environmental science? Am I gonna go for engineering?
Mhm.
And I heard you when you said you feel it just happens that way. I feel like that's all of the career of coming to the environmental space. So
Yeah.
we are so
Yeah.
lucky to have someone like you. I really also appreciated you explaining I didn't know that you started a nonprofit for the purpose of, helping people in that way. That's beautiful and dynamic. Another thing that we think about when it comes to environmental answers, there's, the nature environment, but there's also,
Mhm.
the social environments and,
Mhm.
the psychosocial, the environment
Yeah.
is not just limited to what we see as the green spaces, but the whole person and what they're experiencing. So
Yeah.
that's really, really dynamic that you've been able to do that, and that's what brought you here. So now
Yeah.
I'm curious about what it is that you are doing now. What is it that you're working on now? And I heard you say you alluded to the faith-based organization. Is this still the same organization or is it a different one?
No, it's a different one. And yeah, I work in, yeah, and just to say that that idea of the environment being more than just nature, um, is really, there's this book that Pope Francis wrote called Laudato Si, which is this phrase that means praised be. And Pope Francis wrote that book based on this prayer of Saint Francis. And it's all about what Pope Francis calls our common home, the planet. And one of the main ideas of that book is that everything is connected and that how we treat each other and how we treat the environment are one and the same. Like we don't care for our common home because we don't care for each other.
Mm.
And that when we better care for each other, we'll better care for our planet. So what you were just saying right now about like the
Yeah.
environment is everything, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I work on. So yeah, so what do I work on? I work in a faith-based organization. It's called the Laudato Si movement, so it's like based around that book.
All
Very,
connected.
very timely comment from you. And it's a Catholic organization, um, international NGO. Um, we are active in about 130 countries. And my role in the organization is I'm a member of the executive leadership team. And the work that we do is along three areas. So, one, we try to cultivate a better sense of that spirituality, that like realization, oh my gosh, yes, everything is connected. Like, this is a part of my faith. And that kind of transforms culture. Like you were saying, that important psychological cultural piece. So, that's part of what we do. Um, we also work on sustainability. So, we are working to help Catholic institutions and individuals install solar panels and reduce their water use and all of those kind of sustainability type of actions in the global north and the global south. And then our final piece is advocacy. So we work on national policies, sometimes local policies, and then definitely international policies like at the COP and things like that. And part of that is also just changing the narrative. Like environmental action has been so much this like shame, 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 you did a bad job. You know
Mm.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's been limited to like a certain group of people. And the kind of power of the Catholic Church is that 1 in 6 people on earth are Catholic. Like
Mm.
it's humongous. It's in all regions. 20% of the people here in the US are Catholic, almost evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats. So it's just this voice that reaches so many people. So that's the kind of like potential and power of doing this type of work.
No, that makes sense, and that was really good. I learned a lot about your organization just now too, and something that came to mind while I was listening to you is that what is your, like, leadership style to do this work? Because it takes a certain type of, I would say, like, know-how or thought leadership in order to do work that's touching so many people in that way. So what
Mm.
would you say is the leadership style that you lean into in doing the work that you're doing?
Oh man, I wish I had a better answer for that. I've been thinking a lot about how to be a better leader.
No, I
So
think you're an excellent leader, and if it feels like I put you on the spot on that question, when I think
no,
about,
no,
you
not at
know
all. I'll tell you the kind of leader I wish I were. Like, I'll
okay,
tell you what I've been thinking about. And a lot of this actually is based on conversations with you and other people, like at Duke, and just a lot of reflection on. I feel like when you meet people, you always like, or you can always learn something from them. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, so the type of leader that I aspire to be, which is the question I'm going to answer,
mhm,
the type of leader I am. Um, I think the leaders that I have really admired in the past are people who genuinely invite leadership from others. Like, I find that style of leadership to be really, really effective. Um, and I mean, golly, whether it's with like an international organization where you have to, kind of account for all the realities and geographies and context, like you definitely need tons of like, you know, grassroots bottom up leaders in that context. But I feel like even like within Durham or within where I live in Central Virginia, even if it's in one like smaller place, like you still a good leader is the one who like nurtures leadership in the people around her or him. Do you know what I mean?
I do
Um,
know. So what I'm getting from you also is that, like, in order to do this work, it's almost like you can't lead just from, like, top, like, authoritative. It has to be more inviting other people to contribute, and that's a big part of what we're trying to push out with Environmental Answers is to be
yeah.
able to help other people feel empowered to do the work that they're doing. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I
And
know
then
that that's what you
go
guys
ahead.
do like so well, like providing those answers that like almost like lead people to ask more questions.
That's I mean, the goal is to keep asking questions to keep us going forward.
Yeah.
So, something else I was curious about, when it comes to your work, like right now, are there any initiatives or projects that you're working on that you're super passionate about or that you want to uplift and highlight that you guys are doing in order to move us forward when it comes to sustainability?
Sure. Um, so maybe a couple of the projects that are happening right now that are really exciting. These are ones that we are contributing to. My organization is contributing to. One is this thing called the Laudato Si Action Platform. So that's that Laudato Si name again. Everything keeps coming back to that somehow. It
No, it's
seems
good
like.
though.
So that is a tool that helps institutions to pursue sustainability in a holistic way. So kind of like what you were saying, it's not enough to just recycle, or
Mhm.
like it's not enough to just install solar panels. Like we need that transformation of our spirits, our relationships, our economy, our culture, our ways of doing everything. So the Laudato Si Action platform provides tools both to help institutions plan, but then also a list of suggested actions, the most impactful things you can do in each one of those different holistic areas. And those like not knowing what to do is what prevents so many people,
Is
as you
this a
know.
open platform or is this something that they have to pay for? Or how does this platform work?
No, it's totally free. It's 100% for free. And anyone can sign up. It's Laudato, LAUDATO, CSI, Laudato Si Action Platform.org.
I'll definitely get the link from you and put it in the
Okay.
description so that people can get it. Because
Okay.
I had not heard of this, and I know that there like you're saying, there's a lot of organizations that the excuse of no budget tends to be at the
Yeah.
top of the list, like, there's no budget for that, but
Right.
knowing that there are platforms that are being established and created that are free resources that are dynamic like these,
Yeah.
more people need to know about that. That's a really exciting initiative.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm glad you think so. I think so too. And maybe the other quick thing I'll just mention really quickly is this year, 2025.
Mhm.
Of course, there's a COP in Brazil um, with a lot of uncertainty about the US's role in that COP. But within the Catholic Church, it's also the 10th anniversary of that book by Pope Francis. And then it's also what the Catholics would call a Jubilee year. So this is supposed to be a year of celebration. Debts are forgiven. We kind of come home and celebrate. And so it's this kind of big, like everything lined, like the stars are aligned, like everything is like all at once. So there's an initiative for this year called Raising Hope. And it's a way to kind of demonstrate leadership by people of faith and to show we've been putting our money where our mouth is for decades. We've been doing the work installing solar panels. We've been marching. We've been writing our Congress people. We have been doing everything you're supposed to do. And really, it's now time for policymakers to follow our lead. So that campaign is Raising Hope. And that's another, I think, great thing that's happening this year.
No, I mean, that's really interesting, especially because one of the questions I was gonna ask you is about, like, how are you collaborating with partners? And this is, like, coming in and bringing in that collaboration piece because, like, more people need to be invited in, so I didn't know that about that this was a 20 like, I'm learning so many things. I'm like, "Oh, okay, 2025." I'm like, "All debts are forgiven." I'm like, "Yes, let that be my reality. Let me pull in that energy." That's where I was at. So I was super excited. I was leaning in. I was like, "Hmm, take a note on that, take a note on that." Cool, 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 cool. So, I know that you have alluded to this, how, like, a lot of people can feel, like, overwhelmed or filled with wonder when it comes to, like, the environmental, like, sphere. I know some of the listeners that intend to listen to this may not know all the terminology, so I had a few things that you said earlier that
Mm,
I wanted to, like, just recap.
yeah.
One of them was, like, what is COP and, like, what does that stand for? What is that about? Could you break that down a little bit for us?
Yeah, 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 totally. And thank you for that reminder. I really appreciate that. So COP is that stands for the Conference of the Parties. So the parties are different countries, and what they're party to is the UN's framework convention on climate change. So a bunch of countries 30 odd years ago, over the series of a couple of years, kind of came together in a bunch of conversations year after year after year to try and figure out climate change is a global problem that's caused by individual decision makers, but it's something that we all have to live with. So, how do we kind of, I mean, turn down the temperature, like literally? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that's the convention. That's this framework, this convention, this agreement on climate change. It's supposed to provide a way for countries to work together. And then every year since that convention, that framework was first kind of developed, every year since then, the countries, the parties have come together to try and like hammer out the next details. Okay, we've agreed we need to work on it. What does that mean? How are we going to
Hmm.
do that? So that's the COP. That's the Conference of the Parties, and there's been 29 of them so far. The 30th is this year, and 10 years ago, there was the Conference of the Parties that resulted in the Paris Climate Agreement. So the Paris Climate
Mhm.
Agreement was done in Paris. The COP was in Paris that year, and the countries kind of actually finally agreed. Okay, we're gonna. This is the mechanisms. These are the mechanisms. Um, it's like kind of worked. Like it's sort of like it's better than nothing,
Mhm.
probably. But emissions keep going up, and greenhouse gas pollution keeps going up. And over time, the Conference of the Parties has become a place for fossil fuel lobbyists. Last year, there were more lobbyists from fossil fuel countries than there were people who represented fossil fuel companies, more lobbyists from fossil fuel companies than there were representatives from the least developed countries.
Hmm.
So the people who are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, who are least able to deal with it, people in low-lying Pacific islands, people who are in the Hurricane Alley, they have less representation in these COPs than the fossil fuel companies do. That's very upside down.
Yeah,
So
but is this open? Is COP like a private thing? You have to be invited? Like, what is the process? Because like when I'm hearing this is it because they can't get there? Is it
yeah,
access?
it's partially because they can't get there, and then there's like different areas at the COP. And
Mhm.
for the one that's the where the like the negotiators are, the people from the countries who are supposed to be hammering out the details, um, there's a very limited number of accreditations for
Okay.
those areas. And the people who have access, like social access, are the
Yeah, yeah.
ones who get those accreditations, like physical access.
Okay.
So this year the COP is in Brazil. The last 2 years it was in countries that get a majority of their money from fossil fuel production.
Mhm.
So they obviously have an incentive to like use the COP almost as like a trade show kind of for
Yeah,
them.
okay, okay.
So this year it's in Brazil, where there's more like active civil society. So that's
Mhm.
why this year is like it's kind of almost, I don't want to say like a make or break because the US is not going to be there. But it has more potential to make real progress than the last few did.
That okay. No, that's helpful. I appreciate you explaining to me. I only have a few more questions for
Yeah.
you, but like something that's top of mind based on what you just shared is for organizations that might be coming to this episode looking for answers on like what they can do internally, no matter like the climate when it comes to things politically or the time and space as an organizational like leader, like how can they design their organization to be ready to like face this challenge as we go into the future? Essentially, what mechanisms or ideas or any pieces of advice could you share so that they can remain, I guess, encouraged?
Yeah. No, that's such a good question. Um, and I know that I really value our friendship, like the ability to like, just check
Yeah,
in
we can
with each
talk.
other, like
Talk to each other. Talk to your neighbors. Make sure
talk
you're
to your
communicating.
neighbors.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially like finding those partners who are present and there for you and you can like just share ideas and bat things around. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I think that is so like I think that what Environmental Answers provides it like honestly like even if you weren't running Environmental Answers, I would say like that's like a really crucial service. Like EnvAns is doing I think what a lot of organizations need, which is to be that partner. You know what I mean? And I think that for me that would be the first piece of advice to organizational leaders is to find a like-minded community and find
Mhm.
the people that you can rely on. Because like work on climate is not always encouraging. And so
Yeah.
you need the people who will kind of keep you going when those moments, when you might feel like, why am I doing this? Like, what are the next steps? Like, you just need someone, I think, in your corner.
No,
Um,
I think that's really helpful and I mean, that is how you keep community is how you keep going, right? Because like
yeah.
we're all gonna be dealing with these problems. I was listening to, I think it's like The Myth of Normal. Anyway, it's one of
Mm,
these books that I was listening to, but a main point that I wanted to share was just the fact that we sometimes can function like we're not connected. Like, as
yeah.
individual silos dealing with these problems, not
Yeah.
knowing that there's so many other people or other silos. That's also a reference
Yeah.
to a TV show that's on right now. But anyway, so we're all connected. We need to like work together in order to remain encouraged.
Yeah, that's what
So
you just said. It's all connected. Like that's like that like Pope
yeah,
Francis like thing is. I feel like that's like the theme of this podcast episode.
the theme is connection is
The
the new
theme is
climate.
connection.
We need to make sure that as we go forward, we are more connected, having more conversations, candid
Yeah.
like this, or just making sure that we're communicating to one another so we can be in agreement to move forward.
Yeah.
So like my last thing was centered around I saw a post you did this morning. It's
Mm.
related to current events and what's happening unfortunately in LA right now,
Mm.
dealing with the wildfires. And seeing all of like I talked to some of my younger friends. I'm a
Mm.
millennial, but, my Gen Z and then
Yeah.
I learned that my child might be Gen Beta, so that was a whole other thing. But
Oh
anyway, when I'm
my.
looking at like
Yeah.
the future, I know not even alpha, beta, like a
Right,
whole
right.
different
Next
like
iteration. Yeah.
so. What I'm trying to get out is just like realizing that like these things are happening like all the
Mm,
time,
mhm.
and like thinking about ways to keep people encouraged outside of community. What is it that you do? I saw that you shared some resources that people could maybe donate to. Like, how do you find those resources and making sure that seems like a tactic for you to stay encouraged?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this is gonna sound really like cheesy and hokey and like fake, but like it's actually the truth. Like I find a lot of encouragement in the leaders around me, like honestly and truly. And where I work right now, it's a movement. It's a movement building organization. Um, and so all of those like dozens and hundreds of local people and local organizations that are using their unique genius and creativity and networks and power to get things moving where they are. And I didn't have anything to do with it. Like I had like, even though like in my own organization, but I'm not like I haven't like directed anything. I haven't like I find out about stuff that people are doing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like for me that's like wow, like we have so much. There's so much like there's it's easy I feel like to get it discouraged when you hear about, these big processes like the COP or whatever. But when you look at people like you, people like me, people like everyone we know, like everyone is like trying their best, you know what I mean? And like for
yeah.
me, that's like what I find really, really encouraging. I don't know. How about you? How do you stay encouraged?
So I would say, setting up this platform, having opportunity to
Mm,
talk to people like you is a part of my encouragement. It's like staying
mm,
active.
yeah.
Something I was gonna add, I was gonna see if I could add like a little banner to show that this is how you spell Logan. So like I was like, all right, put that at the bottom. But anyway, so that was just
Nice.
like a side note of why my eyes were averted for a second. But I was having the opportunity
Yeah.
to engage with you and others on a platform like this is what truly, truly keeps me encouraged because
Hmm.
honestly, like when you're in isolation, back to the silo, it can seem
Yeah.
like there's just so much on you. But when you know that like our responsibility is just to get us so far. So like I think about it like how generations have progressed. Like,
Hmm.
we started at one place, now it's like passing
Hmm.
the baton. So make
Yeah.
it sure that your baton is as strong and as colorful as you can make it, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, we're not going to be able to fix all of these environmental problems. If you know a little bit about climate science, you know that like the CO2 that's up there, we're not going to be able to get it out. So like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like accepting the
Yeah.
fact that like we're just trying to make it better so that the next generation can pick up what they have and make it a little better for the next one. So that's what I do.
Totally. Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. I appreciate hearing that. I mean, kind of similar to me as well. Like we do our best and it's a tiny little thing and it doesn't really rely on us. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like a drop in a bucket, but that drop still counts.
that's right.
Every drop
That's
counts.
right.
It
Yep.
might seem like it's nothing, but it all
Your
counts.
drop
It's
is
becoming
beautiful. Yeah.
well, I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you today and coming on the Environmental Answers podcast. I feel like this new climate is like one of hope. And,
Mm,
I'm
hmm.
very grateful to have someone like you to be connected to that keeps me hopeful as we go into a new season.
Oh, well, likewise. You keep me hopeful too, Tiana. I'm like the whole like work that you do. And yeah,
If if anyone wanted to stay in contact with you, what's the best way to find you? Is it your LinkedIn or
probably LinkedIn. Yeah. So I'm Reba Elliot, Lattice Movement, as you very thoughtfully put on the screen there.
again,
Um,
just for you to see so you can see it again?
There it is. Yeah. So that's probably the best way is LinkedIn, Reba Elliot on Lattice Movement.
Okay, cool. So that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Environmental Answers. We look forward to seeing you guys again soon. It'll be Wednesday, the 22nd, around 1:15. See you then.
Thank you, Tiana. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.